The desert did not forgive. It didn't ask questions or offer mercy. It simply took what was left behind and forgot. By midday, the sun had already scorched the wind still. Vultures circled overhead, drawing slow black rings in the pale sky. And below them, half buried in dust and heat, a woman lay broken. Her dress was torn, her lips cracked. Sand clung to her skin like salt. One boot was missing, the other torn open at the seam. She had no hat, no water, no name worth calling anymore, only a faint breath in her chest, and blood drying along the curve of her ribs. She'd been left for dead, and for a time even she believed she was. Miles away, a lone rider pushed through the heat. He was barely upright, slumped in the saddle, one arm pressed against a deep wound just below his ribs. The horse, lathered in sweat and dust, moved with a stubbornness that matched the man on its back. His name was Calder Nash, and he was a tracker. Not the kind who chased bandits for coins, but the kind hired to find what was never meant to be found: men, children, women, bodies. He had once been military long ago, then Pinkerton, then nothing at all. Now just a man bleeding slowly across the sand. He nearly rode past her. At first she looked like a shadow, a mirage twisted by the heat, but something in the way her fingers twitched, barely, made him stop. Calder dismounted slowly, teeth clenched in pain. He staggered to her side and crouched. One glance told him all he needed to know. She'd been beaten, abandoned, maybe robbed, maybe worse, but she was alive. And that made her his responsibility now. He poured the last of his canteen between her lips. Her throat moved, reflexive. She coughed, eyes fluttering open, just barely. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked dry. "Don't," Calder muttered, pulling a rag from his saddlebag. "You're not dead yet. You want to stay that way, you listen." He lifted her gently, staggering under the weight and pain. The wound at his side burned, but he didn't stop. "Whoever left you out here," he growled, "they're going to regret not finishing the job." By sundown, the desert had swallowed their tracks. And somewhere in the middle of nothing, two broken souls leaned on each other. Not yet healed, not yet whole, but still breathing, still alive. The cabin was little more than timber and tin, half sunk into the red rock canyon south of Dry Mesa. No town nearby, no law either. Calder hadn't lived in it much, just enough to keep it standing, stocked with basics, and out of reach from men who wanted him dead or indebted. By the time he arrived, the woman in his arms had slipped in and out of consciousness a dozen times. She didn't speak. Her head lolled against his chest, breath shallow, but she held on, barely. He laid her on the cot against the far wall, then collapsed against the opposite beam, clutching his side. Blood soaked his shirt now. The bandage he'd tied before leaving the canyons was coming loose, but he didn't move. Not yet. The desert was quiet that night, broken only by the rasp of shallow breathing and the creak of the old wind vane overhead. Calder watched the stranger he'd dragged out of the sand. Her face was bruised, one eye swollen, hands raw. Whoever had done this to her had meant to erase her, leave her forgotten in the sand. He'd seen too much of that before, and he was tired of burying women. Morning came sharp and dry. Calder was the first to wake, jaw tight from pain. He stitched his own wound with shaking hands, gritting his teeth through every pass of the needle. No whiskey, just firelight, thread, and habit. When he turned back to the cot, her eyes were open, blue, clouded, cautious but alive. He approached slowly. "You with me?" She blinked, tried to speak. Nothing came. "You need water first, then answers." He helped her drink. Slow sips from a chipped tin cup. Her throat worked against the pain. Finally, her voice rasped out like sand over stone. "Where?" "Safe," he said simply. "Far enough for now." For a moment, she just looked at him, confused, wary. "Then why?" He didn't answer right away. Just sat back down, watching the fire flicker between them. "Because someone left you to die," he said. "And I don't like unfinished business." She stared at the ceiling a long while after that, as if trying to piece together the jagged remains of memory. He didn't press her. He knew what it was to need time. He also knew time always ran out. Outside, the desert wind began to rise again. And Calder Nash, wounded tracker, unwanted by the world, realized he'd just crossed a line he hadn't touched in years. He'd taken in a stranger, and this time, he cared what happened next. She slept most of the second day. The fever came and went in waves, her body caught in that fragile place between recovery and relapse. Calder kept the fire steady, cleaned her wounds with boiled water and bark-soaked cloth, and changed the bandages without asking for thanks. She didn't know where she was. She didn't know who she could trust. But slowly she began to believe she might survive. That evening, she sat up for the first time. Calder was outside, hauling water from the dry creek bed. When he returned, she was gripping the side of the cot, hair tangled, shirt hanging loose on her shoulder, ribs bruised like dark rivers under her skin. But her eyes were steady. He set the bucket down. "You shouldn't be up." "I need to be," she said. Her voice was stronger now, rough but clear. "I don't want to be weak anymore." He didn't argue. He just handed her a cup of broth and watched her drink it slowly. After a while, she asked, "What's this place called?" "Doesn't have a name, do you?" He nodded once. "Calder Nash." She repeated it softly. "Calder." Then a pause. "I don't remember mine." Calder didn't flinch. "Might come back. Or maybe I don't want it to." He studied her for a moment, then stood and reached for a blanket. "You don't have to rush toward who you were," he said. "Out here, you get to decide who you'll be." That night she dreamed of sand, of voices yelling, of a wagon creaking in the heat. She saw a man's hand, the ring on his finger, the sound of a slap. And then the desert. Always the desert. In the morning, Calder left a rifle leaning against the wall. "If you remember anything," he said, "you'll need to know how to protect yourself." She looked at it, touched it, then looked up. "What do I call you, tracker? Soldier?" He shrugged. "Just Calder." She nodded, thoughtful. "Then maybe I'll be Ash." He raised an eyebrow. "Ash?" She looked out the window at the desert's edge. "Because I burned what I came from, and I'm still here." Calder didn't smile, not exactly. But he looked at her like maybe, just maybe. Ash was a name worth keeping. Ash spent the next week on shaky feet. Each step from the cot to the doorway felt like miles across the desert all over again. But she didn't complain. Calder watched her limp across the cabin floor with her jaw set, sweat glistening at her temple, and he said nothing. Not out of disinterest, but respect. She was rebuilding herself, piece by stubborn piece. By the third day, she asked for a knife. "Why?" Calder asked. "To peel potatoes. To feel the weight of something sharp in my hand again." He handed it over without a word. Later that night, she gutted a rabbit while he watched from the porch. "You've done this before," he said. "I didn't used to," she replied. "But I think I've forgotten how to be helpless." He liked that answer. They fell into rhythm. He hunted, she cooked. He sharpened tools, she cleaned the guns. The silence between them shifted, from cautious to comfortable. It no longer felt like two strangers tolerating each other. It felt like living. Ash began asking questions, not about herself, but about him. "Who taught you to track?" "My father," Calder said. "And war. Ever marry?" "No." "Why not?" He paused. "Didn't know how to stay still long enough." Ash tilted her head. "You staying still now?" He didn't answer right away, but his eyes didn't leave hers either. That night, a dust storm rolled through the canyons, screaming past the shutters and rattling the roof. Ash stood by the window, her arms crossed, eyes watching the chaos. Calder stepped up beside her, holding out a cup of tea. "Desert gets angry sometimes," he said. "So do people. You remember anything new?" She shook her head. "Just feelings. Heat, fear, someone yelling, then nothing." Calder nodded slowly. "Memories like fire out here, slow to spark, easy to lose." Ash looked up at him. "Do you believe people get to start over?" He didn't speak for a long time. Then finally, "Only if they earn it." She didn't sleep much that night. But when she did, her dreams weren't filled with sand. They were filled with footsteps on wood, the sound of a man breathing beside a fire, and a cabin that felt, maybe for the first time in her life, like something close to safe. The first sign of trouble came with the boot prints. Calder spotted them just after dawn, pressed into the fine powder outside the eastern ridge, where no one was meant to be. Deep, deliberate, and fresh. And he didn't call out to Ash. Didn't need to. She had already stepped onto the porch with her rifle cradled across her arms, bare feet silent on the planks. Her eyes followed his to the prints. "How many?" she asked. "Two riders, watching, not approaching." "Friends of yours?" "Never had many." They tracked the prints to a ridge of red stone overlooking the canyon floor. Calder crouched beside a twisted mesquite bush, glassing the horizon through his spyglass. Nothing. Just sage, dust, and the curve of the land fading into distance. But someone had been there, and they hadn't come for a drink of water. Ash stood behind him, silent, her hair tied back, eyes squinting into the wind. She didn't ask what he planned to do. She already knew he was the kind of man who didn't wait for trouble to knock. Back at the cabin, Calder cleaned his rifle with a calmness that came from experience, not peace. Ash paced. "You think they're after me?" she asked finally. He looked up. "You remember something? Not names, not faces. But I know this. Whoever left me in that sand, they thought no one would find me. They were wrong." Ash nodded. "And now they want to finish the job." That night, Calder showed her how to check the perimeter, how to place small twigs across the path, how to listen for broken brush, how to know when something didn't belong. "You always this paranoid?" she asked. He smirked. "I call it prepared." Ash was quiet a moment. "I think I was a fool once," she said. "Someone who believed men with money had more honor than men with dirt on their hands." Calder didn't answer right away. "Then, you're not a fool now." The next morning, Calder found a torn scrap of paper nailed to a rock near the old well. In crude, blocky letters, "Turn her over or bury her yourself." Ash read it, then handed it back like it meant less than dust. "I'm not running." Calder folded the note and tossed it into the fire. "Good," he said, "because I don't want to survive anymore." She met his gaze. "I want to fight." They spent the day preparing. Not running, not hiding. Preparing. Calder buried a small stash of ammunition beneath the floorboards and rigged the outer trail with a simple trip line. Nothing deadly, just enough to warn him. Ash reinforced the window slats and packed a small satchel of essentials: water, bandages, a compass. Not because she planned to run, because she wouldn't be caught helpless again. "You've done this before," Calder said, watching her tighten the saddle cinch on the mare. Ash didn't look up. "What?" "Prepared for a fight." She nodded slowly. "Not like this. Back then, I didn't know what I was worth. And now?" Her eyes met his. "Now I do." That night, the desert was too quiet. Even the coyotes held their breath. Calder sat near the window, sharpening his knife with long, even strokes. Ash cleaned her rifle at the table, hands calm, movements exact. Neither spoke of fear. But it lived in the room anyway. Tamed for now, but watching. "I keep waiting for my memory to come back all at once," she said finally. "Like a flood." "It won't." "I know." Her voice dipped. "But pieces are rising." "Good or bad?" "Worse than I hoped, but not worse than I can face." Just after midnight, it happened. A branch snapped, then silence. Calder stood, rifle in hand, eyes fixed on the darkness outside. Ash moved to the far window, peeking between the slats. Figures. 2, maybe 3, creeping low toward the edge of the clearing. "I see them," she whispered. Calder's jaw tightened. "They're testing us." Ash turned, voice steady. "Then let's answer." The first shot cracked through the night like thunder. Calder took it, clean, fast, dropping a shadow that had moved too close to the porch. Shouting followed, scattered movement, horses panicked. Ash fired twice, driving the others back into the trees. Then silence, then breathing. Then, one man stepped forward, hat low, rifle slung, his voice carried in the still air. "We don't want no war," he called. "Just the girl. You give her, we walk." Calder stepped onto the porch. "She's not yours." "She ran," the man snapped. "She took what wasn't hers." "She survived," Calder replied, "and that makes her mine to protect." A beat. Then the man said something that made Ash's blood run cold. "Her name's Isabel Greer, and she was supposed to be dead." Ash froze. The name struck something inside her chest, sharp and clear. Calder turned slowly. "You know it?" he asked. She nodded, breath shallow. "That's me," she whispered. The name echoed like a gunshot in her mind. Isabel Greer. She hadn't heard it spoken in what felt like another life. But the moment the man said it, the name curled around her spine like fire. It wasn't just a name. It was a chain. A memory. A life she had nearly died trying to leave behind. Calder kept his eyes on her, calm but sharp. "You sure?" he asked. Isabel nodded slowly. "Yes." And in that moment, the weight of her past returned, not as a fog, but as full, cruel clarity. She sat by the fire, silent, eyes fixed on her hands. Calder didn't push. He simply poured coffee into 2 tin cups and waited. After a long pause, she spoke. "I was promised to a man named Burke Harlan, land baron, widowed twice, rich from railroads. My father owed him favors, debts, so they traded me like property, said it was an opportunity." She looked up, her voice steady but low. "He tried to make me obedient. Kindness at first, then control. When I resisted, he used fists. And worse." Calder said nothing, but his jaw had tightened. "I ran," she continued. "Took a horse and a satchel. Caught a ride south with a group headed toward New Mexico. But one of Harlan's men followed. Waited until we were alone in the desert. Beat me. Took the bag. Left me there." She breathed in, shaking, but refused to cry. "I should have died, and I would have, if you hadn't found me." Calder leaned back, folding his arms. "So now we know what they want." "They think I'm still a prize," she spat. "Even after they tried to bury me." "Well," Calder said, standing, "they were wrong twice." Isabel looked up. "What do we do?" He looked out the window. "They won't stop coming. Not men like Harlan. He doesn't want you back. He wants to prove no one walks away from him." Her voice rose. "Then let's stop running." Calder turned to face her. "That means war." Isabel stood, shoulders square. "Then I'll fight it with my name on the line." Outside, the desert slept. But inside that cabin, 2 people sat across from one another, Not strangers anymore, not quite lovers, but something deeper. Allies, survivors, fire and steel. By morning they had a plan. Calder mapped it out on the table with a stick of charcoal and a scrap of canvas. Isabel stood beside him, watching the lines appear like scars. This canyon bends hard east, he explained. They'll ride through here, straight, fast, thinking they've got us cornered. They don't know the land like you do. They don't know you like I do, he said. Isabel looked up, startled. Calder's tone hadn't changed, but something settled in the space between them. Trust that had grown not from words, but from weathering the same storm. They spent the day laying traps, thin wires strung between rocks, loosened boulders near cliff edges, trip lines soaked in oil for fire just in case. Isabel worked without hesitation. Whatever she had been before, genteel, obedient, decorative, was long gone. What remained was sharp, steady, and unafraid. When Calder caught her watching him from the ridge, he spoke low. You were never made to belong to a man like Harlan, she shrugged. Then maybe I was made to bury him. That night they sat close to the fire again, but not for warmth. The wind had calmed, the air dry and still. Isabel held a pistol in her lap, spinning it slowly in her hand. You ever think you'd end up like this? Calder smirked. Living in the middle of nowhere, bleeding into my boots, and defending a woman with a bounty on her head? Yes, she said, smiling. He chuckled. Sounds about right. She leaned toward him, eyes thoughtful. You never asked me what I want when this is over. I figured you'd tell me when you were ready. I'm ready now. He waited. I want to stay, not as a ghost, not as someone hiding, but as someone with a new name, a new life. She reached out, fingers brushing his wrist. With you, if you'll have me. Calder didn't speak. He simply took her hand and didn't let go. Before dawn, the sound of hoofbeats echoed in the canyon. Calder stood at the doorway, rifle across his chest. Behind him, Isabel Greer, once left for dead, loaded her pistol with steady hands and a fire in her eyes. The pass was coming for them, but this time, they were ready. They came at sunrise. 4 riders, faces hidden beneath dust-covered hats, rifles slung, movements sharp. And behind them, like a spider at the center of his web, Burke Harlan himself, still clean, still cruel, and still expecting the world to kneel when he arrived. Isabel watched him from behind the ridge, heart pounding. Not with fear, but clarity. This was the man who had tried to own her, who had nearly killed her, who thought justice was something only the powerful could define. Not today. Calder moved like smoke through the rocks, rifle steady, boots silent on stone. His eyes tracked the formation, noting where they split, who held command. He'd faced worse men in worse places, but this was different. This was personal. The trap was sprung just past the halfway mark. A horse screamed as its leg caught a buried snare. One rider fell. Another panicked, fired into the trees. Blind. That was all Calder needed. Crack, one clean shot, one man down. Isabel emerged from the ridge above, her silhouette framed by the rising sun. Harlan, she called, voice hard. The man turned, squinting. You should be dead, he growled. I was, she said, but you made a mistake. He sneered. You think this tracker can save you? Isabel raised her pistol. I didn't come here to be saved. Harlan fired first, but he missed. Isabel didn't. Her bullet struck his shoulder, spinning him from the saddle. He crashed into the sand, groaning, reaching for his sidearm. Calder appeared behind him. You don't get a second shot, he said coldly. One hard blow to the head, and Burke Harlan fell. Not like a legend, but like a man who'd finally met justice in a land that had no more patience for kings. The other riders fled. No fight left, no orders, no reward. Just dust and silence. Later, Calder and Isabel stood over the unconscious form of the man who had tried to break her. We could leave him, Calder said. Let the desert take what he gave. Isabel looked down at Harlan, then shook her head. No. We send him to the marshal in Tombrock. Let him rot in a cell with a nameplate and a record. The kind of justice men like him hate the most. Calder nodded. That's your call. She looked at him, a half-smile forming. It's our call now. As the sun climbed higher, the desert felt different. Lighter, like a weight had been lifted from the very earth. And for the first time in her life, Isabel Greer was not running, not hiding, not pretending. She was standing, free. The ride to Tombrock took 2 days. They tied Burke Harlan across his own horse, bleeding, bound, and barely conscious. Calder didn't say a word to him the whole way. Isabel didn't either. Some things didn't deserve words. By the time they reached the town limits, people stared. Not because they recognized her. She was long forgotten in their world. But because something in her posture had changed. Isabel no longer walked like someone carrying shame. She walked like someone carrying truth. The marshal took Harlan into custody without a fight. Too many whispers about the old man's past. Too many unanswered disappearances. "Reckon this'll stir things up," the marshal muttered, tipping his hat to Isabel. She simply said, "Good." That evening, Calder and Isabel sat outside the town's inn, watching the last light fade across the hills. "I don't know what comes next," she admitted. Calder looked toward the trail leading west. "You don't have to. I've lived under someone else's name too long." He met her gaze. "Then choose your own." She thought for a moment, then nodded. "I don't want to be Isabel Greer anymore. That name died in the desert." "And what name do you want?" She smiled, slow, genuine. "Ash Calder." His eyes widened slightly, then softened. "That's got a fire to it." She reached over and took his hand. "So do I." They returned to the cabin a week later, not as strangers, not even as survivors, but as something more. They rebuilt the front porch, planted a new row of agave near the water barrel. Calder carved a new sign for the door. It read, "Ash and Calder, Tracking Trade Shelter. No one left behind." In time, folks came. A runaway girl from the borderlands. A wounded drifter with more scars than stories. A widow needing rest. And Ash welcomed them all, because she knew what it meant to be left for dead and what it meant to be given a second name. And Calder, he never said much, but every morning he poured 2 cups of coffee, whistled while he saddled the horses, and carved new names into the side of the porch, one for every soul they helped get back up again. Because love for him wasn't flowers or speeches. It was standing beside someone who kept standing up,